a few years within that same decade, after that group's inception, the beginning of that group, another group came. Another group who also professed Islam. They claimed, now with the correct pronunciation, to be Muslims, not Muslim as we say, as some of the non-Muslims say. He's a Muslim. She became a Muslim. No, the correct pronunciation is Muslim. That group, within the same decade, they began, not in this city, but they became very strong in the city. And that group still exists today, like the first group, which is the Nation of Islam, commonly known in those days, in the 40s and the 50s, and more specifically in the 60s, is when they actually began to use the term by way of a non-member that called them that, the Black Muslims. A group that was headed by the man named Elijah Muhammad. And that group took root in America amongst black people, especially in Newark. Especially in Newark. It became very, very grounded to the point, once again, that we see this so-called Islamic/Muslim influence here in the city. And there are other groups that claimed to represent Islam, or they were Muslims, but they misrepresented Islam. But there are two types of the three. They are the true Muslims who spread true Islam, and they were in the minority. And then there were the groups who were not Muslims and did not have Islam, and then there were the groups who did have Islam, but they did not represent Islam properly. And there were many in this particular city, many. For those who are my age, or just a little younger than myself, the young guys sitting here, 16, 18, 20, even 30, you won't remember those groups. But the people my age, we remember them. And they claimed to represent Islam. And then the all-wise, true and living God, the supreme being, the giver of life, the causer of death, the one who needs nothing, everything needs him, he determined from his infinite wisdom that Islam, the true Islam, would be established here in the city. Many of the people that you see sitting here in front of you, they are similar to myself. Many of them. Not most of them, but many of them. They either came from, like myself, from a church like this Pentecostal church across the street, or those of our brothers and sisters who are sitting here who are from the Latino background, came from Catholicism, or they came from being Jehovah's Witnesses, or Protestants, or Lutherans, or whatever denomination of Christianity that they came from. And then others, they left Christianity on their search for the true Islam and the truth about Islam in search of God. And they joined one of those groups, those two groups that we mentioned by name. More specifically, the so-called Nation of Islam. And you still see these guys selling newspaper. And in fact, one just tried to sell a newspaper on my way here on Elizabeth Avenue. And when I looked at him, and he came with his bow tie to the car, and he had the final call in his hand, and he said, "Would you like to support the program, brother?" I started getting flashbacks. Because 39 years ago, I was on that corner. And I was on Broad Market with the paper in my hand, called Muhammad Speaks newspaper, with the same, not his bow tie, but the same bow tie, and the fish, and the bean pies, inviting people to what I thought was Islam. Why do we say all this? Because we're assuming that either some of you listening to my voice are Christians, true Christians, either true Christians, And we would say probably if you are true Christians, you're in the minority of all the Christians. Or on your birth certificates or on your legal documents, you have Christianity as your religion. But you really don't accept it and you don't practice it. So we're saying this to say that in this religion called Christianity, there's also some false representation, some misrepresentations. And you need to understand that the religion of Jesus and the religion of Moses and the religion of Abraham and the religion of Isaac and Ishmael and all the prophets was in fact that which represented the true way of life and religion, which is that which they received from the Lord of the worlds, who was above all of his creatures, and sent to mankind. And the finality of that message was given to that man named Muhammad. All the prophets and all the messengers sent to mankind, the finality, testifying to the truth of those prophets and messengers. Even the Messiah himself, whom the Muslims believe he is the Messiah, Jesus, testifying to the truth of every single prophet and messenger that came before him, not saying anything different. And at the same time clearing up the misrepresentations that the people falsely attribute to Jesus and Moses, just like those groups falsely attributed Islam to their groups. Listen to this verse in the Quran. And the Quran, by the way, dear listeners, may Allah guide you. May the Lord of the world guide you to the truth. Listen to the words of Allah, God, in the Quran, in the Arabic language. Because the Quran is not English, and the Quran is not in French, and the Quran is not in Urdu, and the Quran is not in Sanskrit, or Russian, or Latin. The Quran is still intact in the original language. So we want to read to you in that language what the Lord of the world said. And we want you to ponder upon the interpretation of the meaning of these verses so that you will understand that if you are a 5%, or you're leaning towards being a 5%, or anything of the like, then there's no way you can truly be a friend of God if you don't understand these verses.